So good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. John, Lori, and myself are here on today's webinar. My name is Haley Clift, and I'm an account executive at OMX. Today we're going to be talking about the value proposition and understanding the role of primes and SMEs in that. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks to Lori Delaney-Berry from CFN and John Wright from JPOM, who are both joining me on this webinar today. This is the first of a four-part series. Our other topics include cybersecurity, the Build in Canada Innovation Program, and strategic sourcing. So if you are interested in signing up for those webinars, I'll make sure to push that information out. You can also email me if you can't find the links to register, but I'll make them pretty obvious for everybody. Couple housekeeping items. We're going to be recording today's session, so if anyone has to leave early or wasn't able to attend, or if someone else in your office might find this useful, I will be sure to mail the link out to everybody afterwards. It'll be made available on the OMX website, and we'll probably also share it in our next newsletter as well. Secondly, we will be answering questions at the end of the webinar. I've set aside anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how everything goes, so we can cover as much as possible. If you would like to ask a question, you can direct it at either of our presenters, and I'll be introducing them before they start so you can note their names. There is a question area there that's available, so if it is directed towards John or Lori specifically, just make sure to put their name at the end so I know who to ask it to. And yeah, so outside of that, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Lori Delaney-Berry is from CFN Consultants. She has worked in private industry and aerospace and defense community for the past 18 years. Lori has worked at Do Engineering Development, ULC, DRS Technologies, as well as Babcock Canada, with roles such as Offset Manager and Industrial Participation Manager, managing IRBs and ITB obligations, approaching anywhere from close to $1 billion. Lori is also a founding member of IPAC, which is the Industrial Participation Association of Canada. Lori? You can go ahead, Lori, anytime.
Oh, hi. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Lori Delaney-Berry here. Thank you, OMX, for inviting me to participate in the panel today. Let's get started. So we're going to go through the IRBs transforming to ITBs, the ITB and value prop requirements and evaluation, and then capture strategy. Next slide.
Sorry, go ahead.
You got it. Great. Problems within the IRB policy. Can you go to the next slide, Haley?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. There we go. So the old IRB policy called for 100% Canadian content value, and that remains today with the ITB policy. The pass-fail evaluation criteria unfortunately did little to ensure the best results for Canada, for Canadian industry. Also, the penalties, the 10% liquidated damages, were not strong enough. They weren't implemented ever. No company has ever been penalized under the LD policy in the IRBs. Next slide. And again. ITBs and value proposition. Sorry, I'm just getting my bearings over here. So the Industrial Technological Benefits Policy is applied to all defense and Coast Guard procurement. This includes mandatory compliance criteria requiring that all bidders submit and commit to 100% ITB and VP within their bid proposals. The ITB with the new VP rated evaluations are now a key discriminator in contract award. So within the project evaluation, you have a percentage for technical, a percentage for price, and now the value proposition. You can go from anywhere from 10% to 20%, although we have seen 25% now on the latest CSC release. You can go ahead to the next slide.
Okay.
The ITB and VP requirements. So transactions must be new work and they must be compliant to the eligibility criteria. So the criteria would be causality. So it must be demonstrated to be brought about only because of the procured project. Canadian content value, so no foreign content is allowed. An example of that, your product is made in Canada, however, some of the parts of that product came from outside of Canada. The value of those products purchased outside of Canada do not count towards Canadian content value. Your achievement period, your Canadian content must be completed within the specified periods. This typically ends a year after the contract ends. And typically begins with the first piece of documentation from the government, as in the LOI or RFI. Eligible donors, only the prime contractor or the eligible Tier 1 suppliers. And the non-eligible activities, third-party activities, brokering, swaps aren't allowed in Canada. As well, some non-eligible activities could be stuff, anything that was imported to Canada, taxes, duties, proposals, and bid costs as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so ICBVP requirements continued. So, again, it is, the CCV commitment is 100% of the contract price. This includes any amendments, amending the value, the dollar value up or down, and it also includes options. There's a small business commitment of 15% mandatory. Now the mandatory commitments. Canadian content value, of course, as we've discussed. Canadian supplier development engagement. R&D could be commercializing a product in development, or it could be new R&D, like basic research for development of a new product or technology. And of course now the export capability. So if you have a product that you can export outside of Canada, it fits in well with the value proposition pillars. Next slide. So ITBs and value proposition favors actions that strengthen Canadian markets, investments that support enhanced productivity and broader industrial and technological high-value activities such as tech transfers. So tech transfers, something like the four pillars in value proposition are important to follow, and unfortunately they change per RFP that is coming out. So it's difficult to position yourself in advance of the release of the RFP. Broad investments that fit within the defense market will most likely be able to be counted under the value proposition pillars and fit into R&D. Next slide. So the timing of fulfilling the value prop commitments should also be considered. At bid proposal, you're asked for 30% upfront. Typically, you want to do higher than 30% to protect yourself in case one of your transactions have not been accepted. Next slide. Capture and engagement. Understand and position for indirect transactions within the industry sectors. targeting prime and tier 1 supply chain to be included in OMX to allow primes to identify and track technologies and regional location of companies. Investment transactions are used sometimes for supplier development and R&D. So sometimes your value proposition transactions can hit multiple pillars within the value prop on a particular RFP that you're responding to. You may be able to access defense, R&D, and export all in one transaction. So maximize your direct work for all VP requirements. Understand and position for indirect transactions within those industry sectors. Maximize your small medium business plans per project, and access capability to respond to the requirements for value prop activities that include all of the value prop criteria. So sometimes you can do all four: defense, supply chain, IP transfer, R&D, and exports. And you'll have to mitigate the financial risks related to the performance guarantees, which are now stricter within the ITB. So not only now can you get a 10% liquidated damage within the ITB value prop, you can also get up to 20% holdbacks. Next slide. When does the ITB policy apply? Next. Sorry, next slide, Haley. Well, we can talk to this slide. The policy does apply. In the ITB policy, including value prop, will apply to all eligible defense procurements over $100 million, as well as Coast Guard procurements over $100 million, which the national security exception applies. The eligible defense procurements with contract values between 20 and 100 million will be reviewed for the use of value prop. And it says here that they've seen one with a contract below 20 million for ITBs. I'm not sure what that program is. I'm sure it exists, as it does go on a case-by-case basis below 20 million.
Hi, Lori. I'm sorry, my audio cut out on me, so I couldn't speak earlier when you asked me to go to the next slide. But I think we're going to hear from John right now. If anyone has any questions specifically for Lori, I have a couple that have already come in, but please feel free to write them in, and I'll make sure to address them at the end and get your answers for you, okay? So John, he has 30 plus years experience in the multinational high-tech sector. His past includes working with Lytton, which is part of Northrop Grumman, Honeywell, British Aerospace, Smith Industries, which is part of GE Aerospace, in technical or executive managerial roles. Significant past and present clients include BAE Systems, General Dynamics, Do Engineering, Trimble, Teledyne, KF Aero, Viasat, and several other SMEs in the defense and aerospace world. He has extensive experience in the pursuit and capture of major aerospace defense and security procurements as well. So John, whenever you're ready, you can take over for me and let me know to go on.
Okay, very good. Hey, thanks, Haley, and thank you, Lori, as well. The audience out there has the pleasure of hearing from two very intelligent and enthusiastic young ladies. Now you're going to hear from a grumpy old man. The advantage of that is that I've been around this industry for probably longer than most of the people who are listening. I have worked for companies that have been major obligors for offsets and run programs that were in excess of $100 million. And I've run 3 small companies that benefited from offset programs. So I've been on both sides of the fence. I've figured out what works, and I've certainly figured out what doesn't work. So with that introduction, why don't we go to the next slide, Haley?
I think there's a little bit of a lag, so it's
That's okay. It gives me time to think. Us old guys, we need time to think. You know, Laurie's just given us a very good overview in a very short space of time of what the new defense procurement strategy is all about, what the difference is between the old industrial benefits and the new industrial and technological benefits, and what the value proposition really means to small business. And what it means to you in very short statements is the fact that no longer are offsets just counted as a pass-fail criteria for major bids to the Canadian government. They are rated as part of the overall bid selection process, and they can have a very fundamental influence on who gets the win. As Laurie pointed out, we can get up to 25% of the entire decision-making process defined purely by the value proposition. Now that is very attractive to anybody who is a prime contractor. That's 25% of the overall voting power that if you are very intelligent, you can actually get for nothing. That's like 25% off your price. So these are very important numbers. Therefore, previously, small and medium-sized businesses tended to be pretty much a pain in the butt to the big prime contractors. We knocked on their back doors and their front doors, and we whined and we wimped, and we tried to get business off them. Correctly played now, small businesses can help primes win contracts. And the small ones in that team have now started to realize that. What I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes are the things that you can do to make yourself far more attractive to those intelligent prime contractors. In my experience, having been a small business, we tend to be very selfish, internally focused people. We rarely put on the hat of the person we're trying to sell to. And the purpose of this little talk is to encourage you to put that hat on, to understand who your customer really is and how you best present yourself to him in order that he chooses you over anybody else. The value proposition and the ITB, as Laurie pointed out, now sets aside 15% of the contract value for small and medium-sized enterprises. Now that's a sizable chunk of change, probably in the order of about $1.5 billion a year. So, but there are still far more small and medium-sized businesses out there chasing that business. So this is not an entitlement program. It just gives you a chance to get in the game. So my first point on this slide is sit down one night, pop open a beer, and actually read about ITBs and value propositions. The government has done an excellent job in producing a number of documents that explain in detail what this program is all about. And it's in your very best interest to understand it and use it to your best advantage. Next slide, Larry. So I try to jot this down into 8 simple steps. First of all, get the documents, read them, understand them. If you don't understand them, talk to people like Haley, because they do understand them. So first and foremost, be aware. Number 2, when you're out chasing business, make sure that your public communications to your intended market are all in harmony. I check out customers' websites, things like that, And 9 times out of 10, I find the stories they tell to their customers, the stories they tell on their websites, and the stories they tell on other portals are inconsistent. That doesn't do you any good at all. You know, most primes, OEMs, are very diligent people. They want to check you out, make sure you're trustworthy before they place business with you. Therefore, you need to make sure that you're always consistent in your communications. Portals like OMX help to present that consistency, but the buck actually stops on your desk. You need to make sure that you're telling the right story. Go down to step 4. The Government of Canada provides a very comprehensive service in terms of distributing and announcing every procurement that they intend to undertake, either in the near term or in the long term. You either consult buy and sell, you look at the OMX website and look at the announcements they make. If you still subscribe to MERX, you get information there. And if you really want to get a long-range vision, you actually consult the Defense Acquisition Guide, which actually tells you what D&D is thinking of buying for the next 5 years. Once again, it benefits you to be fully aware of exactly what's on the horizon in terms of opportunities that might be applicable to your company, primarily as, you know, a tier 2 or a tier 3 or tier 4 supplier. So the primes greatly appreciate that. When they talk to small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't have the time to educate you as to what the business opportunity is. If you show up on their doorstep and you understand that they're bidding on a particular program, that you understand that it has a certain technological and financial content, and you start to present yourself as a solution to the numerous problems they have in bidding that program, you greatly enhance your image. Which takes you to point 5. Laurie, who spoke before me, is an acknowledged expert on the industrial offset side of the business. It is a very full-time and professional job. Even though the government has worked hard to simplify its offset programs, there are still many tricks and turns in the overall process. If you're bidding a major program, you know, maybe a contract that's worth $1 billion, on average, I would expect there are maybe 100 to 200 individual transactions that will be required to satisfy the offset program. So that means that prime contractor has 100 to 200 individual relationships it needs to manage throughout the program life and demonstrate to the government that it is actually complying with the offset claims it made and reporting against those offset claims every year until the contract closes out. That is an enormous body of work. Now, each of those transactions is defined on something which the government very innovatively called a transaction sheet. Now, it runs about 7 pages and it's 90% boilerplate, but if you're the offset manager and you have to fill in 200 of those boilerplate forms, guess what? You get fed up after a while. Therefore, the supplier that shows up and has taken the trouble to at least start to fill in an offset transaction sheet with the information that he or she can create certainly presents an image of someone who is really thinking about the program. So once again, my encouragement is to be aware of the program, understand the forms, understand the information that the prime needs to have in order to do business with you, and make sure you present it in a form that he or she can understand. Move down to step 6. Doing business with the government on an offset-related program is not a one-night stand. Most programs that primes bid on normally have a 6 to 9 month bid cycle before the bid closes. and the bids they make normally have to remain open for 1 to 2 years before the government actually makes up its mind. So the span between being aware of a program and actually getting a contract can be as long as 3 years. Even longer if you're working on some really disaster programs. So once again, you need to take the long view, have stamina, always be firm and polite in dealing with the primes, but be persistent. If you get rebuffed from time to time, as I covered in step 7, you just asked the wrong question. Go away, rephrase your question, take it back in, you'll probably get the right answer. And then step 8 is maintain your flexibility. Always be responsive. The primes have enormous choice as to who they put contracts with. Eventually they'll put business with people who exhibit that flexibility, who are responsive, and that they have a high level of trust in. Most offset people I know who are worth their salt and survive in this business work on developing that level of trust. This is not always the lowest bidder always wins. It's the guy that presents the best value solution, the guy that understands the program, the person that presents himself in the most professional light, the person who demonstrates tolerance and exhibits what I would call loyalty to the prime in pursuing that business. So that's my little 8-step speech. Next slide. Now, Haley's going to tell you how OMX can make all your problems go away.
Well, John, actually, I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to say anything else. I tried to summarize everything into the 8 steps. I know that you probably have.
Okay, well,
if there's anything you want to add.
If we got a little time, I do have a few other things that I think
are. You definitely do. We can go back to this one so it's not distracting if you want to go ahead.
You know, first off, I rarely say anything nice about the federal government. It's almost against my religion. But I think in the ITB and the value proposition, they have done a very intelligent thing. Industry lobbied very hard for these changes, and the government responded, and they actually did what we asked. And therefore, now, if we don't take best advantage of the provisions they've made in the ITB and the value proposition, then shame on us. The SMBs in particular have been afforded what I think is a golden opportunity. 15% of the overall contract values are being set aside just for them. And in the value proposition, important things such as supply development, skills development, collaborative research and development all attract value proposition points. So all these features encourage primes to look upon small and medium-sized businesses in a far more favorable light. And therefore, we need to be responsive to that initiative. In the last 2 years, since the ITB value proposition came into being, my company has certainly had the pleasure of working with a number of primes bidding on major programs and seeing many SMBs really differentiate themselves, demonstrate that they are truly sophisticated, high-tech enterprises who can be responsive to the ITB and value proposition. And I think part of this seminar is to encourage everybody else out there to step their game up just a notch or two in order to be responsive to this program. So that's a kind of wrap up there. As I covered earlier on, I think there's in the order of $1.5 billion a year of business being placed by the Canadian government, which is now effectively a set-aside for small and medium-sized businesses. This is a marketplace that, as Laurie pointed out, with the old IRB program, really wasn't accessible to you. So this is $1.5 billion a year that you can get to that wasn't there before. And therefore, the guys in the audience here who listen and who are responsive, I think will greatly benefit. I think people who carry on in the old traditional sense will eventually, if not shrivel up and die, they will find it a much harder time to survive in the defense and the high-tech sector. So they're my quick messages, some other common sense stuff that you could do. When you go to a trade show and you participate in a business-to-business enterprise, when you're fortunate enough to get an audience with the prime or the OEM that you're looking for, when you show up to talk to him, make sure you fully understand his business. I talk to a lot of offset managers for prime contractors. Many exhibit frustration when in front of them, and the first question he asks is, what do you do? If you're going to go talk to a prime, you should be fully briefed on exactly what that guy does for a living, and you should also know exactly what Canadian contracts that he holds and the ones he's bidding on, and know where your skills and talents fit within his supply chain. You know, once again, this is presenting yourself in a fashion that makes you, one, look like you're professional, looks like you're responsible, and a person that he will eventually build trust in. That's, to me, that's common sense, but just like most things common sense, you don't find it often. Secondly, and this is a personal comment, always avoid negative marketing. If you're trying to sell yourself into a prime supply chain, don't try and knock the competition. That doesn't work, because the guy you're talking to really wants to know what you're good at. He doesn't want just to hear you badmouth somebody else, because that doesn't make his problems go away. So always stay on the high ground. Talk about how you discriminate yourself from everybody else. Don't talk the other guy down. So I think that's about it. Over to you, Heidi.
Okay, great. Before I get into OMX stuff, which will be very brief, I just wanted to, I have a couple questions that I think you guys could probably answer now. So we have one that just came in saying, can you speak about positioning indirects as opposed to direct? It's not directed to John or Lori, so if either of you want to take the lead on that, by all means.
Give us that question again.
Yeah, it's just that, can you speak about positioning indirect as opposed to direct? And I think as it pertains to the value proposition and ITB.
Well, yeah, it's a good question, because it presents many challenges in the new value proposition, because in the old traditional definition, a direct industrial benefit is something that actually contributes to the product that the government is actually buying. So if we talk about the surface combatant ship, well, guess what? If you're actually making rivets for the ship, well, guess what? You're in. That's a direct benefit. However, when you see major procurements now, the value proposition provides the government the flexibility to allow certain indirects to be counted as directs. I think with CSC, we're actually saying anything that's maritime engineering is classed as a direct. That I think is, once again, intelligent. It's what industry asked for, in as much as Canada's procurement of major weapon systems is modest, and if the direct definition always sticks to being involved in the actual products that's being delivered to the government, that's very narrow, and sometimes it encourages people to set up production lines where there is no follow-on marketplace. And therefore, by broadening the direct definition into technologies which are pertinent to the procurement, we get a much better outcome. Not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah, I guess to follow up to that question, John, so value proposition where indirects are concerned, you'll find now on the bids that it's mostly indirect transactions that are going to garner you points for the value proposition in order to score larger, such as export strategies, supplier development, and research and development. Those are pillars where you're only going to gain points after you've surpassed the minimum requirement for the particular RFP T's and C's. So again, indirects are important as well.
No, that's a very good point, and I think I want to jump back to a point you made in your presentation as well, Laurie, about certain transactions can actually score in several different boxes. So
That's right.
One can certainly create a transaction which is direct, that maybe has an R&D content, may involve supplier development, may involve skills development, and could possibly result in exports as well. So sometimes you can create a transaction which has enormous value. And SMBs need to keep that in mind, in as much if you can create a transaction like that, then a prime will beat their path to your door to actually get that off you, because it scores 4 or 5 times.
Thanks, guys. I have a few more questions, so I'll just get them out of the way really quick. So, Desiree, you asked for the documents that the Canadian government has produced to simply explain ITBs/VP. I can get my hands on those, and I'm sure John and Lori also have some information. So what I'll do is I'll aggregate all that info that we can get together for you guys, and I'll send out to everyone that registered for the webinar today. So I'll follow up with that information for you 100%. The next question is, Lori, you stated that ITBs apply to R&D and CCG procurement. Does the VP aspect also apply to CCG contracts as well, or do only ITBs apply?
Sorry, does the what apply?
Does the value proposition aspect also apply to CCG contracts as well, or do only ITBs apply?
Well, ITBs are value propositions, so yes, both apply. It is one and the same.
Value proposition is a part of ITBs. Okay, next question is, what is the national security exemption as it pertains to CCG?
That's a good question. I would have to go and look that one up. Can you get that one, John?
Give me that question again.
What is the national security exemption as it pertains to CCG? If we don't have the answer right now, I will make sure to get it from either of you guys, and I can pass it along because I know who the person asking the question is. So.
I think the simple answer is the national security exemption can be invoked by the Government of Canada as it sees fit. And certainly the role of the Canadian Coast Guard has a number of features to it that are considered to be important to national sovereignty. And therefore, by invoking the national security exemption, it essentially is allowed to preclude open competition from offshore suppliers.
Okay, there's a couple more. So as a Canadian company that is awarded a contract as part of CSC, who also regularly contacts R&D as a part of normal business, can this be counted as a VP commitment? And I'm assuming the latter part, the R&D, can that be counted?
Well, I think Laurie covered that in her presentation, talking about causality. What one needs to be very careful in ensuring, if you want to make those kind of claims on an offset relationship, that you can clearly demonstrate that the action you took was in fact encouraged or caused by the contract in question.
Right.
Yeah, thus if you're spending $100,000 a year on R&D, and you bid on a program and you still spend $100,000 a year on R&D, well, the government, if it's awake, will say, we're not sure if you actually, can demonstrate causality there.
It's not new work.
What you could do if you were clever is demonstrate that the focus of the R&D you were doing changed because of the contract you were pursuing. So it's not purely just the dollar value. You need to show causality in the sense that you decided to put the $100,000 into this area because it supported the bid that you were making on a particular program. Once again, it's to be aware. Always look at future procurements, and where you think you're changing your internal investment strategies, leave a paper trail behind that you did that, you thought about it, and this is why you made that decision. Because sooner or later, somebody like Rory will come knocking on your door and asking you whether you have that paper trail.
Okay, I just have a comment there. R&D is indirect to the CFC program, though it's not considered a direct, right?
Pardon me?
Sorry?
Oh no. Okay, sorry. I think I cut out for a second.
Yeah.
I said I just have a comment here. R&D is indirect to the CFC program, though.
Depends what the R&D topic is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then the last question that just came in is, could you speak about multipliers and how to reflect it on a transaction sheet? And then it does example consortiums and investment frameworks.
Well, there are multiple ways to create a transaction with multipliers. Working with a university and small medium business will get you a 5-time multiplier for R&D work. The investment framework also provides multiple layers of multipliers. So if you're a large co working with a small co, do an investment for I think it's a minimum of 3 years under the investment framework. So a cash investment gets you a 9-time. There's a 7-time and a 4-time multipliers as well. Off the top of my head, I think it's marketing support for marketing and training, I think, is in at 4 and 7. I would have to go back to the website. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I mean, at the top level, the multipliers are not pertinent to anybody who's online who's a small and medium-sized business, in as much as the multipliers are to the benefit of the obligors, the primes and the tier ones, to encourage them to enter into primarily collaborative relationships, whereby the face value of the transaction attracts a multiplier to reward them for doing something which the government considers to be productive or innovative.
I think from a supplier side, though, they would find that interesting, because then they can strategically align themselves with a university per se, or form some sort of consortium that they can then come to the primes and have this already established attractive.
Absolutely, it should encourage every SMB to be very open to collaborative relationships.
Yeah.
Because that's why they're being introduced, because they attract special rewards for the obligors. And therefore, when an obligor comes to you and wants you to enter into a collaborative relationship, either with itself, a university, or both, that's the motivation. And the less you think that is hazardous to your business, you'd always be very receptive to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's my point. I guess they would see it. That would be a way that they could get an advantage over the competition, is to form some sort of, collaborative group to go to the prime and give them this option and make it easy for them to choose them over someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. If anyone has any other questions, I'll wait a couple more minutes. Oh, okay, I have one more. So how do I show this on a transaction sheet, or is that not the right platform to pitch opportunities for multipliers? So I guess the question is, what do you think what's the best platform to use to pitch opportunities? Or is it a transaction sheet where you would show this?
Well, no, the ownership of the transaction sheet is the prime contractors or the obligors. Certainly when you interface with prime contractors, you should certainly demonstrate your willingness to collaborate in ventures where they could get multipliers. And if you have any examples where in the past you've collaborated in those kind of relationships, they would be very useful to put in front of an obligor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way is through meetings, verbal dialogue to the prime contractor or tier one.
Okay, does that answer everybody right now? I don't have any other questions coming through. So I'll keep an eye on it in the next couple minutes. We have about 5 minutes left, so if someone has something they want to ask really quick, by all means, go ahead. I just wanted to wrap up by saying I have an idea of who's on this webinar. I can see the attendees. I didn't go through them one by one. But if you haven't yet registered and at least claimed your profile on OMX, you're missing out on an opportunity to at least have a presence. At the end of the day, like Lori and John said, there's a lot of back end that has to be completed. So there's a lot of data that needs to be compiled so they can prove causality. So they can pull together a strategic plan showing they're using suppliers from coast to coast with different capabilities that are fulfilling all these obligations that they have. And more and more that part of it is becoming, it's digital. Lori and John can provide so much information, coaching. They can give you so much strategy, and they just use OMX to gather some data. So at least get on there, register, and update your profile. Have your key industrial capabilities there. Make it easy for primes and their teams to access. And then outside of that, there's also great tools there that are available to anyone. I'm just going to switch my screen for 1 second, but if I don't know how familiar you all are with the OMX site, but if you scroll down to the bottom, we've put a lot of time into creating this help page, and a lot of the questions that were asked today could probably be answered by quickly going through these desk articles. So there's a section here that says, I'm a supplier, so how do I search an OMX? How do I use bookmarks? How do I join a prime supplier list? And then there's just some basic information like understanding the offset policy, ITB basics and value propositions, causality, eligible parties, incrementality. So we spoke about R&D. R&D, like John said, it's not necessarily you're spending $100,000 on R&D. It's showing that incrementality that resulted as a project was awarded or as you were given a chunk of that. And multipliers, there's how to maximize value propositions and gain access to multipliers. So this is a free resource. This is available on OMX. We had a lot of people pour some time in this, and we got some feedback from experts on this. So by all means, take advantage of this. It's just at the bottom of your screen under Help. It's available on any page. You don't even need to log in to get access to it. It's just down here at the bottom. Another cool section that not everybody's aware is if you go to how it works, there's also this tab here, and this is just a shortcut to a government site, but it's the current Canadian ITB procurement, so you can check that out as well. And it just gives a breakdown of everything that's happening right now and what's been completed today, what's in progress, and what's to be identified. This is a really good resource as well. It's just something interesting for you to get an idea of what's going on out there. So I would suggest checking that out as well.
Absolutely, Lady. That's what I meant is that when you go to a business-to-business interface, go to that site. If you're going to go talk to Irving, understand these are the things that they're on contract to do, and talk to those issues. Demonstrate you're aware. I think most primes love to talk to suppliers who've done their homework.
Yeah, and a lot of you on today are actual OMX subscribers, and that's awesome. As you'll know, our team will answer any question you have. So if at any point you want to call in, or if you want to say, like, Haley, like you talked about CSC a lot today, who was bidding on that? That we can get that prime information. We can direct you to how to access their accounts on OMX. Ramping up for this project, you'll see that there's a lot of engagement. Part of a VP is engaging with the community and getting to know more suppliers that are outside of your regular supply chain and giving opportunities to grow their business. The Canadian government has structured this policy so that, you know, the technology and that industry base in Canada benefits from these large procurements. So you'll see that if you message them or join the supplier list on OMX, you'll get engagement, and more and more you're going to see their opportunities pouring through here as well. So as they're building their supply chains and they're trying to be strategic about where they're sourcing from, you'll see RFPs and RFIs coming through here. Don't miss out on them. Check back quite often. Our team will make sure to let you know if it fits within your wheelhouse. But if you want to be a little bit more aggressive in pursuing this business, but like log in, type in some keywords. It's all filtered out for you, so you can see what's going on. If there's something that you're unsure about, you can message me. You can give me a call or anyone on our team, and we'll fill you in on what's going on. And if you do have any questions about how to actually use the platform, I can answer those for you at another later point in time. But it'll only be a 5-minute conversation where I can share my screen. But yeah, make use of the tools that are in here. There's a lot of information that's readily available to you to help you with questions about CSC or any other projects or any other primes that are using our platform to put bids together and create their value propositions. So that's it for me.
I have one last piece of advice I just noticed here, and that is, as I commented earlier on, Canadian procurements tend to drag on for a long time, 6, 9 months, a year, even longer. But they're a bit like the US election. It's 1 year of boredom followed by 2 weeks of panic. So what you will find on offset programs is that the prime in the dying days of its bid will realize that it's missing certain facets in its offset program, and it will phone suppliers at the last minute to try and fill in those gaps. Yeah? My advice to anybody who gets those phone calls is be responsive. You know, primes greatly appreciate suppliers who get them out of a hole at the last minute.
Yeah, and you'll find that a lot of our primes will ask us to reach out. They'll give us a list of capabilities, and they're like, please help us find companies that can fulfill these capabilities that we're missing, we're lacking. And we may not always be able to tell you who that prime is, just due to the fact that it's high competitive nature, but we'll at least ask you, please come in, update this information, this is what they need from you. So like John said, just try and be nimble, try and be flexible, and I'm sure the prime will really appreciate that and keep that in mind. Lori, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think that about sums it up. Thanks again for your time today, Haley and John.
Yeah, it's fun, eh?
Yeah. Sorry, we just get involved. This will all be available online anyway, so we don't need to go into this. But I will also make sure to get John and Lori's contact information, make that accessible to everybody. I'll also make sure that we get some documents from the Canadian government to simply explain ITBs and VPs, and I'll attach the links to those help articles on the OMX site so that everybody can reference those as well. If you do have any questions, please email me directly. I'll help you out, or I will at least pass you off to John and Lori, who can probably give you another answer, or I'll set you up with Nicole, our founder, and she can answer as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much for attending, guys. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks, and it's on cybersecurity, which was strategically chosen for a reason. So please tune in. I will send out the link to register, and we'll do this again. Thanks so much. And thank you, John and Lori. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, have fun. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.